No, I think it's safe to say by this point that TDS has had its fair share of influential updates. Some of them that immediately come to mind in chronological order are Release, the Mega Update, the Hardcore Update in 2020, and the one in 2026, so both of them. Overhaul, Solar Eclipse, Lunar Overture, among many others. You get the idea. The update that you started playing in the gaming is going to be one of the most important to you, just as Frost Invasion was to me. But I feel like one update that serves as a foundational pillar for specifically modern TDS and doesn't get enough credit is version 1.27.0. Or for you normal people out there, the Fallen Mode Rework update. That was like the main focus of the update. I truly believe that this update, along with its additions, are a lifeline that Paradoxium Games calls on every so often, and it serves as a very important milestone in the game because of that. Though before we talk about the update and its inclusions, I think first it's quite important to talk about, what the update changed primarily, which was Fallen Mode, and what Legacy Fallen Mode was to TDS up until that point. So here's a little bit of a history lesson for you. You see, Insane Mode was added in October 2019 as a part of the Mega Update, where it would serve as the hardest game mode available for players to well play. The mode would be renamed in February 2020 to Fallen Mode, which remains to this day, as I'm sure you're all aware. And Fallen Mode would bear changes in itself over time as a result of revised balancing and, the overhaul update, with its infamous Hidden Wave being removed in December 2021, totally not because accessing said Hidden Wave would have spawned in Jax as a boss as he was in Solar Eclipse with his reworked design and function, and half of the enemies being broken in some way or another throughout Hidden Wave, causing the developers to want to remove it altogether. Like seriously, you had Frost Hero, alright? When Frost Invasion came out, he was buffed to have 80k HP and like 2 abilities, and that was just how he was in Hidden Wave. It was really funny. And also Creator had this thing where he would just stop along the path randomly, and he would just he wouldn't move, so it was practically a free win if you could get past the developers. Even through various reworks and updates, Fallen Mode would still remain the king of the traditional game modes. Laugh, I'm funny. And it would even have a reward for beating it on a certain map, being Cowboy and Badlands 1 respectively. And this would remain up until 2022, where the special game modes were added, dethroning Fallen in terms of difficulty, but they weren't exactly soloable. Like, sure, Polluted Wastelands has an achievement for it, but back then it was impossible. You could not solo that. So as a soloable option of traditional TDS, Fallen still served its purpose as a solid 600 coins towards the grind to your 6 golden crates. But of course, when things go on for a long time, the status quo must shift, otherwise people will get bored. So, when the Lunar Overture update released and permanently fired an orbital missile strike in the formula of TDS up until that point, it was clear that something needed to change to actually make the game mode slightly more difficult, especially considering that Ranger now deals over 1000 damage per shot, and Minigunner, a casual/intermediate player's reliable spammable DPS option, now deals 80 DPS for a mere $20,000. So, how did the developers go about this? Well, in early 2024, normal mode was traded out for easy mode and was reworked, and also the armored was added. He has defense now. The easiest mode in the game introduces you to defense. That was where they went with that. And heavier damage options became available in the following months. Think Brawler, Golden Crook Bosses rework, Mercenary Base, and the reworked Military Base. The developers also converted Molten and Fallen to the new game mode system in one update, which I can't remember the date of, which basically just meant that slows and heavies had double the amount of health, which screwed up my Gladiator speedrunning strat, so thanks guys. And they made it clear that the first mode to be reworked to fit in more with the style of post-Lunar Overture TDS in its entirety would be the fabled Fallen mode, and it would be a big update. So over the following months, we got more teasers and renders and leaks depending on where on the internet you looked, and we were ready for whenever the update was finished. Then on August 2nd, 2024, the update that everyone had been finally waiting for had been released. The Scorpion got added to Jailbreak. It was the fastest car. Oh, I'm pretty sure it still is actually. I don't like the camera shake. But of course, that happened earlier in the day. The Fallen rework also came out on that day. Okay, so now moving into the actual update, obviously many towers had to receive balance changes to accommodate the new Fallen mode. For instance, Golden Soldier was turned into a Damn Prodigy. Ranger's placement limit was increased by 1. The cost of his upgrades were also decreased to facilitate that. Turret was also touched for the first time in genuine years, with the placement limit being lowered from 5 to 3, and its DPS output being greatly buffed, so it was actually solid DPS. Engineer was also rebalanced, but it was still pretty much as good as ever. And Brawler had his placement limit lowered from 10 to 6 and hidden detection just completely removed. Needless to say, this update would set the standard for subsequent balancing endeavours, changing the meta as it went on, as if there was some sort of additional challenge that would need some sort of incredible firepower to take down, leaving into the favour of a more stun immune meta, but that's just purely hypothetical. I'm not sure something like that would even be discovered. Upon joining a new match in the actual TDS in-game, players are faced with a refreshed Fallen icon that looks so well rendered that it looks out of place compared to the Molten Boss icon beside it, which was from 2020. You can clearly see how well the models and rendering has improved. So then, upon Wave 1 starting, of Fallen Mode of course, a whole album of new tracks begin playing. I say this because Fallen Mode perhaps holds the record for the most amount of songs released for a single update, being 15 in total. And these tracks are also heard as ambient music throughout all the other game modes too, some way or another. So it's actually virtually impossible that a new player that had started, say, I don't know, last month, would hear the OST in Fallen first, unless they play with the music volume at 0 until they reach Fallen for some reason. The late game theme Catharsis also got remixed into Fate Sealed Shut for hardcore, try saying that one fast, and I think this is really fun, because it provides some ambient continuity between the two modes, so much so that when you reach late game hardcore you'd hear that and think, ooh, I've definitely heard this before, and you know, it does a good job at kind of hyping you up. I like it when games do this. In terms of other musical callbacks, we've got the Into the Void motif being referenced at the, well, what I want to say is the second part of Scream, and I don't think this has any lore significance at all really, given what we now know about the Void and the Hex Dimension. I think this is just solely Enthrallist being Enthrallist, because, you know, he made the entirety of Into the Void, and he definitely had some part in Scream. I can't remember if it was just him that made that, or if it was a collab effort, but overall, Fallen Mode has a really solid OST. Now all I need is some point down the line this really nice part of Portal to Hell to be remixed. Please guys, I really need this. If you go on to Focus's channel and look at the Fallen Mode OST, you will definitely notice that there is one song here which doesn't actually appear in game, and it's Duality. This song is interesting because I'm sure the name is not a reference to anything at all. Word on the street is that it's supposed to be a reworked Fallen King theme, but I'm not entirely sure about that, so I'm not going to cite it. But the reason why it's not in game is because the intro or the loop, I can't remember which one. Basically, one part of the song was too high-pitched for Roblox's moderation. If you didn't know, TDS songs are added in-game in two segments. You've got the intro, which plays once, and then the loop, which is the majority of the song. And it just repeats continually until the song changes, or, you know, something changes, really, that stops it from playing. And only part of this got through. Now, obviously, Paradox and Games, for this massive update, we're not going to do half a job. So, instead, Void Steps is remained, and it's still the Fallen King theme. Ambience out of the way, now we've arrived at the actual core gameplay of Fallen Mode, and how it was a pretty big step up from its outdated predecessor. Now, I didn't just want to talk about this myself, because I'll be honest, I did not find Fallen Mode too difficult, really. I kind of went in with a selection of towers. They'll probably be on screen if I can find a screenshot, and I just kind of won with them, I think, on my first or second try. I didn't really find it too difficult at all, just solo as well. And, yeah, it wouldn't be until I actually messed around with that loadout that I found some problems with this godforsaken enemy. So instead, I thought it would be better that I got a wider gauge of the difficulty of Fallen Mode based on some people in the TDS community. And so I asked some lovely people about their opinions on the difficulty when it got reworked, and I think it's worth sharing them here. My good friend Vivian said, "I was a bit sad that I wasn't able to play the Legacy Fallen Mode because I was too used to its wave structure, and the new Fallen Mode felt a little too difficult for me at the time. But then again, towers are way stronger by now, and the models felt a little outdated, and some people felt the intermediate mode was harder than Fallen Mode before the rework, so I think this update is necessary. I really love the newer models though, and I love how it's actually more theme now instead of having enemies that don't fit the theme much at all, like glitches, shadows, wardens, etc. Certified TDS Twitter veteran Cracksoda said that the difficulty was just the right amount to get me back into TDS. Everyone had gotten used to decimating the ranks of Fallen Mode with the meta towers at the time, and the structural change of the entire mode forced people back to the drawing board, myself included. It allowed a fresh, new wave of strategizing since you could no longer play 6 golden scouts and win. It took a slight bit of effort to come up with a viable strategy with the towers at hand, and how to combat the new threats, such as, you know, flying enemies later on, the Jester, etc. But with enough willpower, I was able to overcome the mode. And I just want to say that this is totally true, especially with whatever they were pulling with the bullshit Jesters on waves 19 and 39. Genuinely, I would love a piece of whatever the balancers were on whenever they concocted that absolute behemoth. So the general consensus was that apart from Fallen Jester being really damn annoying, Fallen mode was actually pretty good balancing wise. The new attribute of Aggro got a little annoying when there were more than 6 enemies present on the field, but that actually gave an incentive to coordinate placement slightly differently and utilise Rebalance Brawler along with towers with shorter ranges and placing things relative to the track on the map. Funny story about the Aggro attribute itself too, by the way. In early 2024, game balancer Tom Danger, I think it was him, created a proposed document on what a Valentines event would look like to replace the usual Christmas event. The reason for this is because of like update scheduling and stuff with the like how 2023 went, but we don't need to worry about that because we're players, not developers. In it, he shared some interesting ideas that, looking back, are really quite funny to look at with an extra 2 years of hindsight. And one detail in particular that sticks out to me in relation to Fallen mode is his concept for an enemy he called the Hot Date, which would debut on wave 12 of his proposed 18 and would have the very interesting mechanic of forcing towers to target it regardless of their targeting setting and option. I remember reading that back in 2024 and wondering how on earth they were going to code that in, especially considering that a certain very well-renowned DPS tower called the Accelerator has the gimmick of locking onto enemies. For those unaware, because let's be honest, with modern TDS code and shock and awe balancing, the Accelerator kind of works differently now. The original plan for Accelerator though was that obviously it shot a high burst beam at enemies and it would continually lock onto said enemy unless it either died or left its range. This did allow faster enemies to come and zoom by, and unless you had some backup defense or, you know, high enough DPS, then they would just zoom by and be kind of screwed, and also Accelerator had charge up too, so fast enemies weren't really his thing. And there was a point, I think, last year where it was actually a balancing proposal that Accelerated Beam would kind of have like run through kill brick damage so that any enemies that would cross it would take some sort of damage, which is a fun idea to toy around with, but it's been about a year since that was proposed and I don't think it's ever going to see the light of day, let's be honest. But regardless, I remember reading that original idea for what looks to be aggro or attraction back in 2024 and being extremely confused on how it was going to work. Well, lo and behold, a few months later we would kind of see this be manifested in the aggro modifier, or attribute rather. Did they perhaps get this idea from the document? Perhaps so, perhaps not. We have no idea, I'll be completely honest, because the developers aren't really open about this. Though, some evidence leading towards that fact is that there are a couple more interesting ideas from this document, that, like some event tower concepts from back then. For example, the Enchanter Tower was a concept that Tom had, which had the effect of turning dead enemies into units that ran backwards across the path and had a slight proportion of the enemy's full HP, and obviously they dealt ram damage as they went down the path in the opposite direction. Now obviously there would be limitations on what enemies could be converted like this, for instance the Fallen King, which is cited in the document, and Tom called this the effect of being hypnotized. Does this sound oddly familiar? Another interesting idea is his third concept for an event tower, and that being the Candy Maker, which would be a solely support focused tower, being the first of its kind at TDS up until that point, which would randomly provide temporary buffs at the beginning of each wave to towers. While that sounds like a really good idea for a tower, that probably won't break the towers with its buff. I wonder if they should add that at some point. Hey, moving on, I think it's time that we give some spotlight to the wonderful modelers that design the enemies, because they have just done a wonderful job this time around. The enemies designs for Fallen mode are a far cry from what they looked like in Legacy Fallen mode. Genuinely, bring up pretty much any Fallen enemy side by side with its Legacy version and you will see a incredible drastic difference. And I know that looking at the icon at first glance makes it kind of look like it's going to be an ice theme mode, which some people think and I can totally see. But when you actually play the mode and more rustic enemies come out like the Fallen Dreg, even though that was added in publicly later, it was a private enemy for the longest time. And stuff like the Fallen Squire, which have very distinct navy and grey tones, bringing the sense of what they're trying to convey with the narrative now with Kyo. And it's confirmed to us through Kyo's lore that the ancient rustic look of the civilization is because essentially they have been collapsed from within by Fallen Queen's curse and just trying to find their final stretch of vengeance before they can finally lean into the light of maybe the afterlife or whatever's after immortal life in the TDS universe. Like, the entire lore for Fallen King is that he's just kind of here to die so he can move off. So that massive beam of light is probably him going straight to heaven, which is quite kind of dark, kind of funny in a way. I don't really get though why he needed 40 waves to prove that to us. Why he couldn't just come out and, you know, die. But hey, I digress. We're also not going to talk about Awakened Fallen King because he no longer makes any sense. So just ignore him for now. He makes no sense at all. And let's talk about Fallen King's model itself for right now. And it looks just genuinely incredible. It kind of looks like that one Minecraft YouTuber that I don't think we're supposed to talk about. And the model is just genuinely incredible. He holds his sword on his right hand now, which is perhaps a reference to pre-overhaul period variations of the Fallen King, which also had his sword being drawn at all times. And he still looks modern and different without straying too far from Fallen King, if you get what I mean by that. He still looked like Fallen King, essentially. His animations are also extremely crisp, and his sound design I'm a massive fan on. Here, take a listen. And of course, I cannot leave Fallen mode without talking about animations, which have been an absolute lifesaver for TDS since they came out, essentially. Okay, I want you to all think back to the Hexscape event, which was the 2024 Halloween event, which began on the 23rd of October 2024, and ended sometime in November. I can't remember exactly when, but there was a time when the Please Donate event and Hexscape ran alongside each other, so yeah, it was sometime like mid to late November it ended. And let's be honest, the Hexscape event was certainly an event of all time. It was an event in TDS. It had incredible production quality, improved pretty much everywhere in terms of Lunar Overture, and it had a very distinct vibe, and yeah, we had very well animated cutscenes and voice acting, and it was honestly, like, looking back, it was a well-produced event. It was pretty good. There were a couple quests that you could do for replayability, but I want to talk about Hexscape more in a future video. And the vibe was, you know, very clearly stated. There were 3 nights which did not get delayed at all as well, apart from night 3 Containment, which got delayed by like half an hour because Roblox kind of broke or something. Also, they left in the old placeholder dialogue of the classic event, which was really funny because on my first playthrough I was so confused as to why Commander had no clue what was going on with this massive portal when he was just dragged through the depths of hell itself. But now, let's take a closer look at the Hex enemies themselves. And then you realize that certain enemies share some animations with some enemies in Fallen mode. Like, for instance, the Hex's Maw, which is just kind of a reskinned Fallen Guardian. I don't like to use that term, and it's so easy to use, and by extension, the Void Knight is kind of a Fallen Guardian reskin. But it also gains health regen for some reason, so like, we're going to be extremely careful with how we use that term. We also have enemies like the Hex Weaver, which utilizes the Fallen Jester's animations, and also applies exactly the same attributes and status effects to enemies that it hits with its little orb. So I do think that this one's safe to call a complete reskin. The Nightmarish Hulk also shares animations with the Fallen Tank. And fun fact about this guy, he was actually called, well, the working name for him was actually Spooky Tank. Obviously the Spooky comes from the fact that this is a Halloween enemy, I don't think I need to elaborate on that. And the Tank, well, considering that it's a high health enemy that runs and utilizes Fallen Tank's animations, I don't think I need to elaborate on that one either. Some more modern examples of this are, for instance, Fallen Necromancer's animations being used in the Frost Acolyte, Fallen Tank's animations being used in the Yeti enemy, and the Operation Ice variant of the Frost Ravager utilizing the Fallen Shields animations. For most of its runtime, there was one day where it actually got its customs animations, which were made for it, but then that got reverted like the day after, so yeah, for one day you could experience unique Fallen Ravager animations until they got added to Frost mode, and as we said, Void Knight using Fallen Guardians animations, along with some other examples. I'm sure you'll have no problem finding them if you just look around, but you guys get the point. Fallen animations are used everywhere. And honestly, this is completely fine, because considering we get really high quality cutscenes for seemingly every night of every event, you gotta appreciate that these things cost money, and sometimes that means that that money can't be attributed, and that time can't be attributed to enemies that may not even warrant their own animations. Like, take for instance the Unknown Boss, and by proxy the Unknown Small. These guys I wouldn't say warrant their own animations. Because, I mean, where are these guys from? You might know them as hardcore enemies, or and by extension voidcore enemies, or nil zone, or if you want to be politically correct, null zone enemies. But originally, these guys appeared in Containment as part of the Hexscape event, Night 3. Though they didn't appear naturally, and were only summoned through the Primordial Draco Blox's summon ability. I think it was called Nightmare Tier or something, I actually don't know the name for it. I only know Super Duper Laser as one of his ability names. And you gotta appreciate that when the Draco Blox is roaming around on its own unique path, enemies are still swarming in out of the portal. During normal gameplay, it's still kind of a hold the line while you chip down the Draco Bloxer. And during this sequence, it's quite unlikely that you'd notice an enemy that spawns like a couple times and has an extremely low health bar, and you'd probably have enough splash damage from engineers by this point and ranges that you probably wouldn't even see them much at all. And in the lore, these guys are also just internal supernova generators. They're just like pieces of Godshard corruption that break off and manifest into this weird creature. And essentially, yeah, they're just scraps of corruption. Not something you'd expect to have a unique animation. And yeah, lo and behold, they kind of do. Well, Unknown Boss has the Breaker 4 animation, walk animation, but Unknown Small, the weaker and smaller of the two, actually I think has a completely unique animation. Don't quote me on that. It might be used somewhere else for another enemy, but off the top of my head, I think it might be just entirely unique. It is quite zombie-like, so probably just a standard zombie uses it, and I've not noticed. But yeah, as far as I know, it has a completely unique animation. The 2nd of August 2024 was also just a very magical time to be around in the community and playing this game, because it also added in 2 new mission quests, which was for 2 new Fallen skins, which end up being 14 by this point in time, the largest skin series to date. The Fallen skins are a really weird spot in the lore because the Discord message said that they vanished into the void, which means that, well, where are they? Unless you bring them into hardcore, they're not there. And obviously the void is quite large, so they're probably stuck in a vault somewhere, who knows, until they got recruited by TDS. We have no idea. And the Fallen as well in lore is really interesting because, you know, they're the last civilization of 2X's power, and they were cursed after Fallen Queen died, and essentially Fallen King's fighting us to find someone to kill him so he can move on to whatever's after life, which is kind of grim. It doesn't explain, again, like, I'm going to say this again, it does not explain why you need 40 waves of enemies to do that, and Awakened Fallen King makes no sense, but hey, originally I think the insinuation was that the Fallen worked with Lord Exo, as stated by the former description of the Champion Templar, and the shard that was found by that one Fallen Hazmat was just an incredible fortune to Fallen King, because it just gave him a last-ditch effort to kick TDS's ass. But obviously that didn't work out very well. You also have the unknown guy in Hidden Wave. Well, the narrator in Hidden Wave, that's definitely Lord Exo, but internally he's called Unknown. And he's definitely, yeah, the soul form of Lord Exo, and he doesn't really say much. He just says the whole, "Ooh, greetings players. Have you faced this challenge?" Very, very interesting on, you know, some random stuff like that before Commander gets confused and gives you the fake kick message. And, you know, Hidden Wave's really well done, yeah, sure. In hindsight, I guess it would make sense that Fallen Mode would have some sort of miscellaneous challenge attributed to it, especially considering that, well, it was kind of known for OG Hidden Wave. And the Error Buster badge, remember that? The unused one from 2020, which had Legacy Awakened Fallen King on it, was converted into the badge for defeating normal Fallen King, as if to insinuate that perhaps the Error Buster had returned somehow. If you wanted to make it more obvious than when they added the triple question mark badge, everyone kind of knew something was up, and well, it was probably Hidden Wave. And then it came to a point in the search, like a day in, where the number 32 became a lead, apparently, and then for the next half year, we would have to make horrible jokes around the number 32, and as TDS players, we'd have to make fun of it and see it everywhere, and know that, hey, look, this is purely the result of the idiocracy of a tower defense player. We don't know how things work out, but needless to say, Hidden Wave was its own mystery and its own complete journey, and in it, and the strategies and how things shifted towards the stun immune meta. Because when you think about it, when Awakened Fallen King shoots comets everywhere, you have like 3 nimble Fallen tanks on the field too. I don't really know why they balanced it like that, but regardless, they kind of did, and it's kind of like, bring spawners. Right, guards and military base could probably kill those. Because your normal DPS is not going to be able to have a shot, because they had nimble and tank. Those things were speedy. And yeah, I was going to have originally a whole segment of this video on Hidden Wave, because I think it's extremely important to talk about, but I'm actually going away soon, and I won't be able to edit and record a lot less than I already can. So part 2 of this video is just going to be solely focused on Hidden Wave. Thank you so much for watching this all throughout. This is the second time that I'm recording a full video with my voice, and the script wasn't done particularly well because I'm currently outside recording this part of the script, and when I was writing this I used my phone's like dictation feature, and it clearly didn't work very well. So if you hear any stuttering, it's because my phone has like picked up my voice horrifically off course, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell I said. Anything else? Oh yeah, I should really schedule this video as like a premiere on August 2nd, because that's when it came out. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll see you guys next time around, hopefully, for the Hidden Wave video. Stay safe. See you guys soon. Bye.